What's up, everybody? Welcome to another Good Gut Live. I'm very excited to be here with you today. Every Friday, we are live at Good Gut Live. We are happy to be here. If you're watching live, you know you can ask questions. I'm seeing you in the chat, whether you're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, wherever you're watching live. Kick, shout out Kick, and Twitch, and all that good stuff. And for those that don't know, my name is James Marin. I'm an integrative registered dietitian, environmental nutritionist, the co-founder of Married to Health, which is an integrative dietetics and nutrition private practice. We do integrative and functional medical nutrition therapy all over the world. And today's an exciting topic. It's really one that I've been wanting to talk about. I've been seeing so much online, just kind of everywhere. My goodness, all social media, you've been hearing about this a lot. You see people like chugging liters of raw milk, and you might be very surprised of what I say about raw milk. So stay tuned. And for those watching later on the Good Gut Live podcast, thank you so much. We've we've been very outspoken on milk, I think, and dairy in general. I think a lot of you know where we stand, but I'm going to be presenting some evidence, but this isn't going to be like this study says this and this study says that. We are evidence-based and we do have studies to back it up. If you're not already, go to marriedshealth.com, get on our email list. We will be dropping a detailed blog on this as well. If you want all those links, you want all the studies, that's great. But in our podcast, we love just discussions. I want to talk to you like I'm talking to a friend at dinner. I want to have a discussion and see your questions if you're watching live, which is great. And if not, that's also fine. But we want to have a discussion here at Good Gut Live, and we want to just again have this long form content be a way for you to truly understand our perspective, all the context, all the all just the in and out, and just being thorough with this topic as best we can in a way that doesn't just go back and forth with studies, because there are studies out there to be like raw milk's great, and there's studies out there to say raw milk's not great, and there's studies in between, and there's studies that are inconclusive, and the list goes on and on. So we'll get a little bit into that, but I want to present a logical argument, proper context, and maybe some surprising context as well, and to really show kind of where this is all coming from, to really show that it's not so black and white maybe as you think coming into this, depending what your bias is coming into this topic. But this topic today is really, I've been a dietitian over a decade, and these are my thoughts on raw milk and raw dairy and all of that, and it's maybe not what you think. But it's going to be very interesting. So again, I'm excited to hear your questions, whether it's on raw milk, raw dairy, or something else, but we'll try to hopefully stay on this topic. And I want to just get right into it, because some of this we've presented at other conferences, or we have done a podcast before. Shout out to Switch for Good. And in full discretion, we are advisors for Switch for Good, which is a nonprofit and really the nonprofit Switch for Good. We've had their founder, or one of the co-founders, on before on the podcast. Shout out to Dotsie Bosch, who's also an Olympic silver medalist. So shout out to Dotsie. And we advise because we want to, just as there are tons of resources for dairy, we also want there to be resources for those who can't consume dairy, for those who are lactose intolerant, for those who have gut dysbiosis, and the list goes on and on. So wanted to throw that out there. And I just want to really just dive deeper into where we're coming from as of today. But again, stay tuned, because my answer to some of these points I have, and maybe even some of your questions, might not be as clear. But for myself, just to get started, I haven't had dairy, man, since I mean, I think the last time I had dairy was maybe 2010. Maybe 2011. So that's kind of crazy to think. It's been like 14-ish years. And I will say, I didn't want to give up dairy. I'm a Hispanic American. All my family's from Mexico and Spain, and we're all pretty much Hispanic. And there's lots of cheese in my culture historically. And I mean, whether it's modern or even going back for a while, like cheese is there, right? And that was one of the hardest things for me to do away with, and we'll get into why that is. But so I want to say that, like, it's not something I was like, I give up cheese one day and milk and all of these things that are delicious to me. No, that wasn't it at all. But once I started to dive deeper and actually educate myself, things got a lot more gray. Things were not as black and white before as me going like, I love cheese and milk. I'm going to eat cheese and milk. It got way more gray and convoluted once I actually started doing research and becoming, let's say, or I should say, educating myself in nutrition. And I started going into a degree, and then I started even going beyond that degree and learning, going to conferences, and just absorbing all this research. So I think I would just want to get into like what even is milk, right? So it's important for us to understand that milk, we call it milk, but it is breast milk. Okay. If it's coming from an animal, and going back to just simple biology, mammals produce milk, right? We're not talking about fish milk here. Fish don't produce milk, right? We're not talking about bird milk. We're talking about milk as breast milk coming from a mammal. And specifically, and because of a long-standing relationship with these animals, we've chosen cow milk, bovine breast milk. Okay. That's what we're talking about when we say milk. We're talking about breast milk. And so then when you realize, okay, that's what milk is, it's breast milk from a cow. And then we can lump in goat milk. We do, people drink goat milk, cultures drink goat milk. Cow milk is the most common. There's yak, and you can get into all those. Let's lump it all as bovine breast milk. What is the purpose of that? Well, just like us as mammals and the cow as mammals, the purpose of that milk is to feed their child. That is why we produce milk. That is also similar and the same reason why the cow produces milk. Once that clicked in my head very early on, I was like, whoa, yeah. Because before that, growing up, definitely when I was a child, and maybe you're similar, let me know. When I was a child, I didn't think about it. This is just milk. It just goes in my fruity pebbles. It goes in my hot chocolate. It makes my ice cream. My mom cooks with it as heavy cream, or all these variations. As if you then make cheese from it, and you eat the cheese and you shred it on your burrito, and you make a grilled cheese sandwich. I didn't think about it until honestly I was in kind of late high school or going into college and actually started researching, oh, rennin, and you need these ingredients, and how do they curdle, and why does it curdle, and the protein, like, wait, and then what is this, and whoa, we have to pasteurize it, and that's what we're going to get into as well. Pasteurization, why do we pasteurize? Wait, what do you mean there's endotoxic? The list goes on and on. So but it's important to understand what it is and the purpose. The purpose of it is there to feed the baby cow, the calf, right? Just like for us, when humans breastfeed, we are feeding our human child. And why is that? Why is that? Is because it is a medium to transfer. Breast milk is a medium to transfer information, not just nutrients. Yes, nutrients, but also information. And this is information in the form of neurotransmitters, microbes. Also, there's prebiotics, probiotics, right? That's in the microbe category. There's also DNA fragments, there's viral fragments, there's so much we're still learning. I want to introduce today in this topic a new term that's even somewhat new to us, which is really cool. Let me pull it up so you guys have it here. But I want to show you the study. So if you're interested, you can also check out this study. But this is new. I mean, this is fairly new. This is a study done in 2024, but this has been. I know there are some other studies on this, but let me make sure I pull up the right one. From the microbiome to the electrome, implications for the microbiota gut brain axis. So, this is really cool. Why do I bring this up? The electrome. We're understanding there's all these terms, right? And you guys have heard me, or if you've been listening, you've heard us talk about the microbiome, obviously. You've heard us talk about the exposome, which is all your environmental factors that make up the exposures you come into contact. That's even me smelling this microphone to this office I'm in, to my home, to my car. It's all these outside environmental factors that influence us, and I'll make this connection, right? We'll tie it all in like we always do, but bear with me. But even now, we're learning about the electrum, which is this biofield energy, which is, I think, 20 years ago when we believed in this, or if anyone was saying this, or like your spiritual friend who's like a yogi and they're like, my electromagnetic field, they wear crystals, they're not entirely wrong, right? And that's what we're open to. We're like, they're not entirely wrong. Maybe there's a lot of unique ways to go about it, and it can maybe lead you down a not so great path in times if someone's not using it correctly. But there is an electrum that is influenced by and from our microbes. So it's pretty cool. So this study is very, very interesting. And I encourage you, I mean, if you're interested, read it. But it gets into the metabolism, the electricity. And where am I going with this? Well, this is all just to say that there's so much more to what we eat, to how it affects us, to even as we talk about microbes and the microbiome and what it does for us, there's so much more. And so breast milk really encompasses this because it is a vehicle to obtain our microbes, to obtain this beginning stages of this electrome, which is really, really cool. And because calcium is so connected to milk, breast milk, right? Like, where do you like Layla recently was at school and they had a health project and they're learning about health in fourth grade. They're really getting into health. And so, you know, the health aspect was they got a booklet from the Dairy Council, and it's like, okay, cool. Dairy Council gives free booklets. They're really beautiful looking. But in the booklet, we were reviewing it with her, and it's like, wow, it makes it seem like you can only get calcium from dairy, from cow's milk. And it's crazy because that's not true, right? Because where is the cow getting the calcium? The cow is eating plants in order to get the calcium. And really conventional cows, because they're so mass produced, because so many people drink milk nowadays, as opposed to even 100 or 200 years ago, way less milk being used and consumed, we have to fortify. We're actually adding the calcium either to the feed, the abnormal feed that they're consuming, or adding it to the end product, right? The milk itself or the yogurt or whatever it is. But the calcium is there. The calcium's not just there to grow your bones. The calcium is an electrolyte, even. The calcium is there to send electrical signals to your body. The calcium is there to also work with your microbiome. And the healthier your microbiome is, studies show it also helps you absorb these the calcium from plants and turn them into ions, these electrically charged bioavailable chemicals in your body. So it's so cool. We can nerd out with on this so much, and I can. Um, it's so cool. So this notion, see, as we're kind of moving along, but we get into these pockets of like, well, calcium only comes from milk, and milk is just milk. Well, no, milk is there for the baby. Milk is a vehicle to transfer, and getting into the nutrients of milk, calcium is one aspect. But again, where does the calcium come from? It's coming from plants, right? You're relying on a healthy cow to use the plant to give you the nutrient, right? And that's a big assumption nowadays, right? Because I mean, would you agree? Would you say, and are you relying that the average cow, the average dairy cow out there is healthy? I would say no, right? The average dairy cow is not healthy. We have many metrics to show us that that's the case. I mean, one metric is 80% of all antibiotics being used or being produced in the US goes to our livestock. Why is that? Well, because the way we house our livestock is conducive to disease. And an easy way to be like, well, should we actually take care of the animal, and should we actually make the animal's living condition better and healthy and with light and fresh air and fresh food? Well, that's going to raise costs, and no one wants to pay, a lot of money per gallon of milk. So in order to keep costs low, on top of taking your tax dollars to subsidize the milk and taking your tax dollars to then give the milk out to companies to use, and then using your tax dollars to put the milk in the school food system. On top of that, we're also going to treat the cow horribly and create an environment for disease in order to decrease costs, so or make more profit, right, on top of that. And so I'm painting this picture, and we'll get more into the nutrients and things like that, but I'm painting a picture of where milk went wrong on many levels. Also, why we're seeing this now emergence of raw milk as like, that's it, guys. This is it. Raw milk. It's the savior. It's the answer to all our problems. The cows are grass fed or organic or whatever promises they make. And we're not using the CAFOs, and which are concentrated animal feeding operations. CAFO, right? It's an acronym. And we're not going to do that. It's raw milk. And not only that, the cow's free range or whatever, they're going to say. And maybe some of it's true, right? Sure. Especially if you are local to the farm, maybe the farmer's right down your street and the farmer has the cows and they're milking them raw, and boom, they're just milking it. Maybe they're straining it and putting it in the glass, and you got your raw milk, right? And that's the answer to all of our problems. Well, no, I mean, it doesn't solve the problem. Like, if everyone who drinks milk or consumes milk switches to raw milk right now, it would be completely unsustainable, right? There's not enough free pasture. There's not enough resources to make that readily available for everybody. So that begs another question that goes down another rabbit hole. But why does raw milk come in as a savior of like the solution to all the problems? Well, the big reason, and if I'm being honest, I see the appeal because raw milk, I will say this, raw milk is better than, and I gotta say this carefully, but I don't. Okay, so there's a lot here. Now everyone is an individual, so this is very tricky because I think what I'll start with is an ideal situation. So I'm gonna get right into it, and then I'm kind of all over the place, but I'm just gonna go with it. Um, and I'm gonna get into an ideal situation. Let me get into the ideal, and we'll work our way back. For those of you that don't know, Dahlia was our first patient. She struggled with SIBO and IBS and so many GI problems on a day-to-day basis, hunched over, causing so many other issues. We wish we had a protocol in place, a program in place that led her through step by step, inch by inch, and really guide by guide, so she had everything at her fingertips. Now we have that. That is our Good Gut SIBO IBS program. You can do it 100% plant-based. You can customize it, but it is one of the only programs that is geared towards plants, that can help you customize plants, that can help you tolerate more plants, and really gets to the root of your SIBO, of your IBS, of your ISO, SIFO, IMO, and any other type of overgrowth. Here's an ideal situation that I want to share with you all. The ideal situation is a person drinking milk. Yes, human milk. Okay. And when we say this, and I want to just pause here for a second, every time we say this or post this on Instagram or whatever we post, we always get like I know there's a lot of feelings with this. I wasn't able to breastfeed. How dare you? Formula is helpful and all that. So I'm not saying. Let me be clear. One, this is not medical advice. And two, let me be clear by saying, I'm not saying formula is bad. I'm not saying we should stop formula. I'm not saying, no one should have formula or we don't need these products. Okay. What I am saying, though, is there's a disproportionate amount of people, especially in the US and even in the UK and first world countries, that are not breastfeeding. And so, according to the science of why someone can't breastfeed, it doesn't match up with the rate of breastfeeding. And I'll stick with the US, right? So, you may have heard us say this, but about 75% of mothers of a 6-month-old child are not exclusively breastfeeding. So an ideal situation is someone receiving milk, and that's milk from their mother, so human raw milk, plus fermented. If you want to even ferment your human raw milk, sure, that's interesting thought. I don't know anyone. Let me know if anyone or anyone using human breast milk to make their baby cheese. That's interesting. I don't know. Or using the coagulation of human milk to make a cheese. I'm sure someone's done it. I don't think it's mainstream. But if you're going to consume dairy, let's say, air quotes for those listening, it should be dairy from your mother. It's your mother's breast milk, right? That's an ideal situation. And so at 6 months, you introduce foods, solid foods. For our daughter, it was like avocado and sweet potato. And then we started doing like yummy, soft chickpeas and pinto beans and black beans. And we started introducing some like easily cooked greens like broccoli. And you start adding solids on top of the human breast milk. Um, then as they get older, so you can breastfeed as long as you want. So we are big believers in the science behind baby-led weaning, right? So this is consuming milk, but you're letting the child decide when enough is enough. For our daughter, it was about 2.5 years old, and we're blessed and lucky. And it was a lot of hard work, and there's barriers. I think we need to do a whole episode on breastfeeding where Dahlia's here and talking to you and sharing tips and tricks and all these beautiful things. And I think we have touched on that a little bit before, but to do a whole episode would be cool into the gut microbiome and the top tips maybe you need to know, or maybe we distill it to like 5 top tips that we learned. Who knows? We'll see what we do with that. Um, but going into this ideal situation, you're consuming milk, breastfeeding. You can do that for as long as your baby wants. You're adding in plant solids. You can add in fermented plant milks like a soy milk, organic, certified soy milk, even glyphosate free, tested, non GMO. Um, and then continuing to add high protein, high omega-3 fat, solid, plant foods. That is totally acceptable. That is wonderful. Plants are low risk for contamination. Plant milk is low risk for contamination. And when you're talking about a raw milk, human raw milk is the lowest risk of contamination. That's great. That's a great scenario. Now, that is, I would say, top tier standard for us when it comes to consuming a raw milk. It is a human raw milk. And then from there, you customize as needed. But knowing that so many of these barriers to your child consuming human milk are maybe things you're not aware of. So I would highly recommend if you're listening to this, you are a mother or you plan to be pregnant or you know someone who's pregnant, make sure they're connected with a lactation consultant, make sure or they're working with a great doula, or make sure they are working with a great dietitian who knows pediatric dietetics, or someone who has it's called the IBCLC, where they just specialize in this, where they can really notify you on, hey, have they been checked for lip tie? Have they been checked for tongue tie? Because a lot of the reasons why moms stop breastfeeding are preventable, or they can be remedied, and then boom, you're back to breastfeeding, right? There's also stress and work and all that, I know. So there's a lot of reasons, but truly it is so important. Truly it is so beneficial for your child. And this is where really the introduction of dairy and like cow's milk comes in, is like, you're too busy, you got to go to work. It's not that important. Just do formula, and then when they're one, or when they're toddler age, do a toddler powder and just do dairy milk. It's much easier. It's much easier. Well, no, it's much easier, but is it much better? Are we seeing the ROI, right? So yes, it's probably, which it is, a little more work depending on your situation to breastfeed and give your child raw human milk, but the ROI is insane, right? When it comes to the first 1,000 days of life, when it comes to your child's gut health, when we're talking about the exposome, the microbiome, the electrome, all these benefits. And circling back to raw milk, all the benefits you're hearing from raw milk, of like, it has active enzymes and it has probiotics that pasteurized milk doesn't have. Human milk trumps that when it comes to what's best for your baby, when it comes to what's best for their health and even your health, right? We talked about human milk oligosaccharides, and they talk about that now in cow's milk, right? It's like bovine milk oligosaccharides. The human milk oligosaccharides is fit for the human microbiome. The bovine milk oligosaccharides is fit for the cow microbiome, which, you're not a ruminant animal. You don't have 4 chambers in your stomach to properly ferment grass, right? It's different. And so again, going back, what our gold standard would be is what I just described. And let me see, I'm gonna take a breath and a sip and see see what people are. I see people here. Okay. Yeah. So I know that that's quite a bit, and there's a lot here. And again, this is coming from just reading so much research and learning about these prebiotics in milk and probiotics in milk and what's going on. But the best raw milk possible is human raw milk. And I know it sounds weird, like really think about that, right? If someone was like, and maybe there are, I mean, I think there are influencers out there who are doing this, but it's like, drink human breast milk. Like, yes. And they got the bottle of human breast milk. It reminds me of that Dave Chappelle skit. I'm going to pull it up. That Dave Chappelle skit of breast milk, right? Where he's like, get that pure Cambodian breast milk. And this is wild because I don't know. I hope people don't actually do this, but this is the Dave Chappelle skit, right? Where it's like he hires people to make him breast milk. And it's like, it's, yeah, it's, I don't know. I probably won't show it. It's kind of gross. But he like hires people to be his like wet nurse essentially. And that's what we used to have back in the day when we didn't have formula. If mom couldn't produce milk, you'd get a wet nurse. And for those who don't know what a wet nurse is, it's someone you hire to breastfeed your child. And that's what they do. And so imagine an influencer being like, I got my wet nurse here and she's giving me the purest, healthiest human breast milk. And it's great because it has all these probiotics and prebiotics and active enzymes. That's way better than being like, I got my cow here, a totally different species, totally different animal. I'm not only I got my cow here, but she just had a baby and I'm stealing the baby's milk for myself because it's so great and this and that. It's like, well, almost like the human is better, right? It's cleaner. If anyone's arguing that a human has more impurities in their milk than a cow, I would put money and bet otherwise, right? Because and there are studies to back that up as well. And I'll even pop one of those on uh, on the screen. This is probably one of the latest ones when it comes to impurities. So you're going to get these impurities uh, in both regular, conventionally raised milk as well as raw milk. So this is a study done recent advances in chromatographic analysis of emerging pollutants in dairy milk. And what's really crazy is their findings. So these emergent pollutants encompass natural or synthetic substances found in the environment that pose potential risks, but which only have been recognized or monitored. So for so long, so for the vast majority of time that we've been consuming milk, we didn't know about these things. We're you're hearing this is where you hear this on TikTok or Instagram. This is some of the stuff that is true where these environmental and emerging pollutants include endocrine disrupting chemicals. So here's kind of the list. EPs consist of various categories including pesticides, pharmaceuticals, hormones, mycotoxins, endocrine disrupting chemicals. With just the endocrine disrupting chemical portion is like a mile long list, right, of all these endocrine disrupting chemicals. And these come from, my gosh, you name it, right? Production of plastics to, diesel production, right? Petroleum. I mean, you name it. These pervasive and they're fat loving chemicals. So they like to stick to fat. So when they're in an environment and an animal drinks it in the water or we come across it, it likes to stick to our fat. And guess where there's a lot of fat in breast milk, right? So cows put on fat, mammals put on fat. The females of childbearing age start to put on fat. That's why girls have butts and breasts and bigger thighs. They put on fat because they're going to breastfeed. Or the idea, the biology is saying you're going to get pregnant one day and breastfeed. So you're going to have the fat stores there to turn into milk. And that's one of the miracles that women can do, which is really, really cool. But if you're living in a dirty environment, which who lives in a cleaner environment? Most humans versus most cows, especially on a CAFO lot. I've gone through, for those in Southern California, I've flown over as well as driven through Chino Hills. I grew up around fairly, and it was a massive dairy farm community. And so what's crazy is in these CAFOs and dairy farm communities, right next to it will be a truck depot. And then down the street is like a metal milling facility. And so they're usually in these highly industrialized areas where, because they're an eyesore and they smell like you wouldn't believe. So they're not going to put them in residential areas, right? It's not like your friendly family farm down the road, which still kind of stinks, but it's not like at your friendly family farm down the road, there's maybe like 10 dairy cows. In the CAFO, there's like 10,000, right? Or like 1,000, depending on the size. And so they're drinking this water. They're being exposed in the air to these pollutants. That is their exposome. It then gets bioaccumulated in their fat, and we eat it. We drink it as cheese. We drink it as dairy or chocolate milk, or we drink it as the baby formula. And um, it's important to know this. I mean, the studies are there for this. The studies show this. And so yes, it's more convenient. I'll give you that. But is it actually better? Right? Is it something to tout and go, I'm going to make a video on raw milk and wow, this is great, when you can get your mother's raw milk? You can also, if you're touting it for probiotics and enzymes, you can get probiotics and enzymes from fermented foods as well as raw plant foods like papaya and pineapple, and any really living food has living enzymes and proteins and microbes and prebiotics. So what are we touting here, right? And again, to go into the studies of those who are eating dairy versus those who aren't, we're looking at a healthier lifespan. We're looking at longer living people when you're eating more fiber, when you're eating in a high variety of plant foods, right? So from epidemiology to randomized control trials to so much more, it's like, yeah. And then those positive studies that are unbiased are part of usually a Mediterranean style eating and lifestyle, where a lot of the dairy is highly cultured and fermented. So again, it goes back to, why is some of the dairy even good in some of the studies? It's because it's fermented, or it's paired with a lot of fermented foods. So one, it's able to break down a lot of the sugars and proteins in milk. And then two, it's paired with a high diet of fiber and fermented foods, right? I've yet to see a study that takes away all those variables and just head to head compares, a diet rich in a diet rich in fermented foods, a diet rich in dairy without fermented foods, and then a diet of just fermented dairy. That would be interesting. Someone do that study, or send me that study if you found it. I haven't found that study, but very, very interesting. But because there's so many variables, again, because this is breast milk designed to transfer and give to the baby, you're going to get a lot of things in that milk that you might not expect to get, right? So that is the important point here. That is the important point of understanding, yeah, okay, I guess it's, yeah, protein and carbs and some calcium, depending on the type of milk, and probiotics, but there are other cleaner, healthier, low risk ways to get that. And if that's your argument, there's also environmental toxins, there's also endotoxins, right, from bacteria. Another big point, there's also, and this is also a study being done that you can look at, there's also what we call, I think, the more scary, I guess, news headliney term are superbugs, but it would be uh, antimicrobial resistant microbes, right? So here it is, antimicrobial resistant genes in raw milk for human consumption. So these are the superbugs. And essentially what this is it's saying there are increasing prevalence of antimicrobial resistant genes and microbes. So because there's so many antibiotics being used in the dairy industry, in our food production in general, when it comes to really any animal, we know this. You pose, this is not something that's, I mean, yes, it's on the news once in a while, but this is not something that a lot of those who consume a lot of animal products like to think about or talk about. But even if there's animal production without the use of antibiotics or maybe less antibiotics or those regularly using antibiotics, there's a high risk of these antibiotic superbugs. I mean, even when you go, for example, to a hospital where you're healthy, you're maybe even plant based, you don't really eat meat, right? And you go to a hospital where there's MRSA, right? MRSA. MRSA is a antibiotic resistant strain of an infection that can kill you, right? And people go into hospitals because it's on surfaces, it's around other people, it's around other people who are sick. And hospitals do their very best to sterilize and clean and ultimately have protocols to prevent this, but it still happens. You get an infection with MRSA because you're exposed and around to MRSA, which is an antibiotic resistant strain that can infect and kill. The same happens with animals, right? So crazy thing. And again, there's protocols in place to prevent this, especially in the US. But um, you could have two different livestock growers, one no antibiotics, one antibiotics, and they maybe manufacture in the same building, right? Or they share equipment. And yeah, you're gonna steam and again do everything to sterilize, but we make mistakes. We're not perfect. There's a little percentage here. That's why you'll see a package may contain some nuts and shell nuts and shellfish and that, because food manufacturers, yes, there's different products, but sometimes they'll share the same facility, right? And yes, they do their best to clean, but there's a little tiny percentage the FDA allows. You're gonna get some contamination, right? This contamination, though, is very serious. It is a very, very serious topic where it is altering not just the genes of the microbes, but even our genes as we introduce an antibiotic resistant strain into our body. So that is, again, not to freak you out, but it is a very serious topic where it's something to be aware of. And um, this is where we think about it in this way where what type of eating, what type of lifestyle is low risk high reward, right? That is great. You can go high risk high reward, sure. And I think a lot of people do that, let's say in the just traditional bodybuilding community. I want to be the biggest, I want to have the best six pack, and I just want to look good and be on Instagram. Maybe I always think of that dude who went viral for his like morning routine where he's dipping his face in the ice. That dude looks so ripped and huge. And I mean, he's making millions of dollars from it. Great. I mean, that's his free will. He can totally do that. High risk, high reward, maybe. And I don't even want to, I don't know his diet, but I've seen, I think little clips and he's eating steak and all these animal products. Go for it. High risk, high reward, right? We see the patient who's like, autoimmune disease, right? They're immune compromised. We're doing medical nutrition therapy. They don't really need the high risk, high reward. They need low risk, high reward. And if we can give that, that's what we're going to give, right? And so that usually goes to plants because plants are low risk, high reward. So why are we not going to give you that? Why are we not going to show you that? Why are we not going to continue to educate on that? That's where we're coming from, right? You are invited to learn on the farm, eat on the farm, and to connect on the farm. Enjoy farm-to-table meals with all regeneratively grown ingredients and understand the real-world experience our experts will share with you. We will see you on the farm for this and so much more. Go to marytalk.com to learn more about the regenerative nutrition and gut health experience. So when it comes to raw milk products, they fall into that category of high risk and low reward because you can still get the reward elsewhere. That is lower risk. It really doesn't make sense, right? If you're going to talk about calcium, if you're going to talk about probiotics, if you're going to talk about prebiotics, you can get them elsewhere, right? So that is so important. All of this, like I said, I also want to comment and maybe somewhat end on this note where I want to say what we agree on. So a lot of these people who are promoting raw milk, I want to say just some points that we agree on. Okay, one being um, Humans need to be in a more natural environment. That's one thing consistently I see with people promoting raw dairy is this idea of, yeah, like being on the farm, being in nature, being a part of nature. We totally agree with that, right? And this idea of raw milk almost being like this cheat code, right? Because you're like, I'm gonna just in this glass of milk, I'm gonna get the probiotics and the enzymes and the blah, blah. And so like, but what you're doing is you're using a middleman. You're relying on that cow to be your salesman, right? In a way, or like you're relying on that cow to be the middleman of like the cow's in nature, and you're trying to get the nature from the cow. I mean, an even better tool is to eat raw fruits and vegetables from your garden, just or from the farmer's market, or be in nature yourself, right? Go dig in some mud, go garden, go rock climbing, go studies show when you're in a natural setting, even the beach, when you're breathing that ocean air, you are seeding your biome, right? That outside biome, that exposome is seeding your biome, right? You can still eat, like I said, raw fruits and vegetables. We are big proponents of cooked and raw foods because raw foods do contain active microbes, active enzymes, active nutrients that are going to help feed and seed your microbiome. So this idea that you need the breast milk of a cow to do this, no. But one thing we do agree on, more of us need to be in nature. Yes, we agree on that. And then yeah, this human need more beneficial microbes. Yes, 100%. So I think where a lot of people go wrong when they give up dairy is they're giving up a main source of probiotics. And so if you've given up dairy, that's totally fine. That's great. We're big proponents of that for so many reasons, not just because we hate dairy. There is an ethical argument to this as well. It's very sad. But even beyond that, uh, when you give up dairy, great. You need to replace those probiotics, right? So this is where you can do a coconut kefir. This is where you can do a cashew yogurt with live probiotics. This is where you can do sauerkraut and kimchi and miso and these living foods. We totally agree with these proponents of raw dairy in that more humans need more probiotics. And I'm not just talking about a pill. You can't take a pill. That's a whole nother episode and story, and go back and search for clips or episodes on that. But highly recommend you're getting it from food. Highly recommend you're getting it from raw living plant foods and living fermented plant foods. That is key. You should shoot for, just to give you a number on that, 4 to 6 servings of fermented foods a day. And that was according to a study that showed participants of the study who included 4 to 6 servings of fermented foods a day saw a marked and significant increase in their gut microbiome, in their activity and diversity. So very, very cool. Those are the 2 big points I think we agree on in the raw milk community. Um, and so hopefully this clarified, I think, where I'm coming from, where we're coming from. Again, if you want to do this, you have the free will to do this, but be informed. Know your risks. There's definitely risk. Again, we are all about low risk, high reward versus high risk and very little reward. Or it's like high risk and the same reward that you could be getting elsewhere. It's like, why am I going to take the path of a treacherous rock climb over a bridge that might give out to get to the same spot when I can go through a nice walk by the lake and the stream and take my daughter by the hand and then get there in half the time, right? Like which route are you going to choose? I guess if you're a daredevil, you'd go maybe the first route. But if you're a family man who wants to protect the health of yourself and your family, you're probably going to go with the latter, right? And you're probably going to go with the second, right? The second option, because you'll get there faster. You're getting to the same destination, and you can bring your whole family in a healthy, happy way. Like that's the route I'm choosing. So that's where we're coming from. Again, we will be putting all these studies into a finalized blog that's going to be titled, I'll tell you the title of the blog. It's basically dairy and gut health. And it's our blog that's coming out. And we're taking time, guys, to do just more dense and again, not longer, but just very dense and healthy blogs as opposed to more blogs that just pop out. But our blog is going to be very evidence-based with lots of great resources and references. and we'll dig deeper into the topics we're talking about on Good Gut Live podcast, as well as on our social media. Um, so if you like this topic, if you like just the context, if you enjoyed this topic, hopefully it educated you a little bit. And there's so much more, guys. Like, just some quick points, because again, I don't want to beat this thing too much, and we'll be doing more on this. But plastics in milk. I mean, just goes to the contamination. UC Davis is doing some really great studies on this, but we're behind on these studies. Okay, we haven't done enough of these studies to show just the high amount of contamination in bovine breast milk. Like, there's even studies coming out on human breast milk. I know you've seen microplastics in human milk and the human body, but again, these endocrine disrupting chemicals, dioxins, these just contaminants, even in human breast milk, we are barely scratching the surface. And as we look into some of these studies, like I popped up on the screen before, into cow milk, it's going to be, again, don't quote me on this, but it's going to be like 10 times worse, because we are not, I know people in our community who drink reverse osmosis water and you know don't spray pesticides and eat organic and all this, and we're still contaminated, let alone the cow who is getting sprayed with pesticide. Or even if the neighboring farm is spraying, the drift is coming over and they're not drinking filtered water, and they're not, the list goes on and on. There's no way in a scenario is a human just more contaminated than a livestock animal, right? So it is something that is coming with more and more studies. There's already studies to show that this contamination is happening, and it's still probably going to take even a longer time for the USDA, speaking of the US in particular, to catch up and go, we got a big problem here, right? And so we've opted to just be like, we don't want to wait for that. We're going to go and educate and inform as many people as possible on a solution that is lower risk, that will not give you these contaminants, and it's going to help your children and yourself seed and form a healthier gut microbiome from the very beginning. And that is hopefully what I've interested you on today, educated you a little bit on today, and we're going to be doing more of that education. So thank you so much, guys, for being here. Seeing some hey and hellos here. Thank you, guys. I'm seeing, yes, what's up, everybody? Great. So yeah, I know it's a dense topic. There's a lot here to break down, but I wanted to get into the logic, the contaminants, a little bit of the nutrients, a little bit of the ethical. I mean, honestly, I mean, that's a big one for our daughter too. Once our daughter understood dairy production, cow breast milk, she was like, dude, I don't like this. Like, that's so sad for the baby calf. What happens to the baby calf? That's a whole nother topic. That's not, I mean, yes, we love the ethical aspect, but you guys can learn about that. Just Google it and it'll show you some horrific images and videos, and you can learn more about that, which is not good. So, but we want to come here from a health standpoint, environmental standpoint, and really just an unbiased educational standpoint, right? Of going, this is what we've found. Please do the research for yourself as well. Find your why, and the win-win here is it's great for your gut, and hopefully it helps your symptoms, and hopefully you feel better and your family feels better and your kids feel better, right? And the list goes on and on. So if you enjoyed this topic, let us know, share this and like this. And we thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to hop off. Have a happy and healthy Friday. As always, feel with each meal and heal with each meal. Until next time, we will see you on the next Good Gut Live every Friday, and always on the Good Gut Live podcast, wherever you're listening to podcasts. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.